How you going, everyone? My name's Jordan, and I'm a Senior Technical Evangelist with Microsoft, based out of Sydney in the DX team. And I've got with me this morning Tim, who is my partner in crime for building the Ignite bot. And so this morning, we actually weren't going to do this session. We were originally going to leave it up to, there's a lot of other bot sessions in the conference that go plenty deep enough, but then we realised that as we put together the bot for real, we had a lot of learnings come out of that, and so we figured that as you guys have been using the bot this week, we'd add a session to go through how the bot works and how we put it together and what sort of things that we learnt along the way with that. So it's a bit of a mid-level technical session. It's sort of not quite 300, not quite 200. We'll show a little bit of code, and we've extracted the code from the Ignite bot for you guys to download and play with as well. So this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to run through pretty much why would you build a bot, or why did we decide that it might be a good idea to build a bot for this conference. And then we're going to get into it and show how we're using the bot framework and various other bits and pieces to actually put the bot together. We're going to look at how we're processing natural language and go through how we sort of got that going with the Ignite bot as well. Then we're going to investigate what happens when the bot doesn't really understand what the person just asked. What can you do to make the experience nice and fulfilling? So we're going to look at how you can have FAQs and things like that inside your bot. I don't know if you're in the keynote on Tuesday, but when I went to demo language, it didn't work so good. And so we're going to have another go at that today, looking at the language translation stuff. You wouldn't believe it. It worked 5 minutes before I walked on stage, and it worked again 5 minutes after. So that was a good little piece of demo gods there. And it's working now, so perhaps 5 minutes before we get to it, it'll go down again. And if we get time, we're going to have a bit of a look through some of the telemetry that we're getting off the Ignite bot. So it's we're collecting a lot of information around how people are using it, so that way we can improve it over time, and that's a big part of any sort of intelligent system, is improving it over time. And then we'll finish up with just a couple more little lessons that we've learned as we've been going along.
Okay, so first question, if you're looking at using a bot for a conference like this, why a bot? What does a bot give me that something else doesn't, like an app? For a user, a bot is just another type of user interface. It's not a search engine. It's not a graphical user interface. You may or you may not even need a keyboard or a mouse or even a screen. It's something that the type of interface it is, it's a conversational interface. It's something that you converse with. So why is this going to be useful for something like a conference? Well, I may have a laptop with me. It might be put away. I might have a phone. I might not have my hands free. I'm walking from one place to the next. It might be easy to just pick up my phone, type something into it or talk into it and get the same sort of experience, same sort of answer, set up a schedule, regardless of how I use it. One of the things that you tend to find first time you think, oh, I'd like to make a bot, is, okay, I've got this knowledge base, I'll just use the bot to search my knowledge base. And I think that's the wrong approach often. A bot is more than just a search engine. If you need to give people a search engine, build them a search engine. People know how to use a search engine, they're familiar with it, they've been doing it for 20 years, they've been putting keyword searches in and getting answers. But a bot's a bit more than that. For a start, it can perform actions. So search engine will give you your 10 results on a page. Maybe if you're lucky, it'll give you your answer to a question straight up. A bot can do a bit more than that. It can say, actually, I want to set an alarm for 6 o'clock, or I want to perform this particular action, go off to this web service and do something. It can understand natural language. So if you think about a search engine, you're thinking about what terms might I be able to type in that are in this document that I think might exist over here, and hope that I'm going to get a match. Bots are about actually having a conversation with it in a natural language. So you don't have to think about what the knowledge base might look for. And on top of that, it can have a dialogue with you. You can ask a clarifying question. Oh, I'd like to see what's on Tuesday, morning or afternoon, and it can have that immediate impact to narrow down your searches without you having to figure that out. So for us, building this bot as an application for the event, we thought about what problems are we trying to solve. I'm not going to try and solve all the problems that I might come across with the event. If I get appendicitis or something, if I get a sore stomach, I'm not going to ask the bot, how do I diagnose appendicitis? So I'm going to focus on 3 key intents that we might be able to help you with the event. Help me find a session. So where's a session based on presenter or something? When is it? Information about the session. Manage my schedule, add the session to the schedule, remove it from a schedule, and then general event Q&A. Most of us aren't from the Gold Coast, don't know the city, may not know the venue. Where can I get a coffee? Where are the taxi ranks? Where's Arena 1A? And then there's a sort of bonus intent that we've added, and this one's actually seems quite superficial, but it's quite important, and that's what I'm calling chit chat. And that tends to be friendly greetings, tell me a joke, smart-ass responses sometimes, and then follow-up dialogue. And why is this important? This is actually training you as a user to use the bot. We've been conditioned over the last 20 years to use keyword search engines, and typically we'll get this interface, we'll type in our keywords. This is trying to encourage you intuitively, without having to think about it too much, how just to converse with the bot in a natural way. I think you had an example about the Apple ads.
A few years ago when they first brought out the first iPhones, remember they were a whole new paradigm for interacting with a mobile device. And on the ads, you were able to pinch and zoom, and you could see how the whole thing worked, and everyone's sort of like, wow, I want to get that. But the ads were also doing something else really important. They were teaching the user how to use an iPhone once they got one in their hand. So people were able to pick up the device and start pinching and zooming and trying out all those great features. And by having that chit-chat in a bot, being a bit cheeky, it's teaching people that they might be able to, adjust the way they communicate back to be more human-centered, as opposed to that conditioning that Tim was talking about with, the way we use search terms is not natural. It's just it's a reflection on the technology, not on the people using the technology. So
yeah. So and the idea is that if you want to understand the bot, you ask the bot a question to learn about the bot. In a way, it's untraining us from 20 years of search engine keyword searches. So let's do a demo of using the bot.
Yeah, so I just figured just to set the background, I was going to pop up the actual Ignite bot and just run through a couple of things that it can do. You see, I've been just asking it some test questions this morning, and around things like where is the police and where is the nearest McDonald's, and just really basic questions about the whole area. But what I want to do is I want to target in some of the actual intent. So we've got natural language understanding. Let's have a look at some of the things that can hit. So I can go, what is my next session? And so what I've done is I've actually, let's spell that right. So what I've actually done is I've gone off to the Ignite back-end system, and it's pulled out my session catalogue, and it's actually telling me when the next session is. And so I can see that my next session's coming up there. What's on tomorrow? Now, this is another type of thing where I've gone off and it needs to clarify some information. So bots are able to come back and request further information. So I can go, I want to know what's on tomorrow morning, and then it's going to go, okay, cool, what track? And I'm going to go open source. And then it starts showing me sessions. Now, from this dialogues, I can either get some more information about that particular session, and it's going to come back and give me the full detail on it. And I could also add it to my schedule, so I can just go add to schedule there, and it's going to go off to the Ignite backend automatically and add it to my schedule. Ah, look at that.
It'll add later.
Yeah, it'll add it later. So basically the idea is that you can customize your experience. The bot is contextual. It knows all about you as a user. It doesn't know any personal information. It just knows about you, your logged in account there with the Ignite system. And so there's a whole range of different things that we can type. When we enter something, we go off to natural language processing to get back information about what it is they're trying to do, as well as the things that they're trying to do it too. So we'll demonstrate some of that later. But what I want to quickly do is jump into the code. So bots are really easy to build using Microsoft tooling. So you've got the choice of either Node.js or C#. This one's written in C#, Web API. Our bot was actually hosting the Azure App Service. It's just running a couple of instances up there. They're very lightweight, so you don't require a huge piece of infrastructure to power them. And they really are just Web API endpoints. They're just RESTful endpoints. So when we put the bot up, you actually have to put a URL into the developer portal, and that is just a /API/messages on some URL. Now, to actually go and debug a bot, what you need to do is go to dev.botframework.com. We'll flip the URL up soon, and grab the bot framework emulator. And there's also some NuGet packages you can install in your project, and then the bot's going to start working. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly fire this one up. So run it in Visual Studio just like normal. There's nothing special that goes on here. I don't have to connect to it in some funny way. And it's going to go to the home screen. And then I go into the bot channel emulator. Now this is a bit like a test version of Skype. So it's actually a little chat client. You can see what you're sending off to the bot, and you can see what you're getting back, and it works with your local machine. So in this case, I'm connected to that localhost endpoint there. If I type ping, hits the breakpoint, and I can start investigating and interrogating what the users are. So I'm able to go through into this. Oops, just zoom that. Okay, so I'm able to go in here and can scroll down here, and I can see that there's text that I just typed is in there. So it's actually just an object. And at its most basic level, I could do something in response to that. So if I start stepping through here and I go, I can see that I've detected if it's a message, grab the text, if it equals ping, then I create a connector and I return the result back to the user. And so just let that one run through to completion. It goes ping pong. So it's actually really quick too. So now that's the most simple example of a way to interact with the bot. You obviously don't want to be having to go if string.index of blah, 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 blah. That's going to get very old very quick. So what I can do is I can ask it bigger questions. Actually, I just got to set a breakpoint. Get down to here. Ask that again. And this is all running. This is the code that is available on the GitHub. So what I'm doing this time is, instead of actually interrogating after a couple of pre-checks, instead of interrogating the user's query directly, I'm going to fire it off into the bot framework, some of the SDK helper libraries, and they're going to help us process what the user is trying to do, and so we can give a meaningful response. Okay, so just to summarise that, we're building with Web API, we're using C#, we're using Node.js if you'd like to. It really is up to you. The SDK allows those languages, but in reality, you could probably build with anything that you wanted to. You just have to go a bit more manual, a bit more closer to the metal. You can pre-process some simple actions. For example, in the Ignite bot, we've got some commands you can fire in to check stuff that happen before all the rest of the processing, before it starts getting all intelligent. They really are just string searches for things. But where the bot framework really comes into its own is with these helper classes, with these bits and pieces that we're going to show you coming up next. So yeah, get over to dev.botframework.com. You can get started there. There's also really large sample library of SDK examples, and also the SDK itself is fully open source there, and it's up on GitHub, so you can actually fire up the demo apps and then step through down into the base classes to sort of have a bit of a fish around what's going on there if you get stuck with anything. And of course, there's the Microsoft.bot.builder NuGet package as well. Okay, so back over to Tim to get all intelligent.
Yeah, so the bot framework's nice and everything, but it's just a framework that we use for hooking up different things. Bots need to be able to understand natural language most of the time, and a key part of that here is the Language Understanding Intelligence Service. It's one of 20, 30 odd Microsoft Cognitive Services. Who here has created a Lewis app in lewis.ai? Okay, maybe 10% or so. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a couple of Lewis apps. So we go to lewis.ai, and we're actually going to create this app at the website, and our bot will then go and call into that app. This is our production one. We're going to show you, to start off with, a slightly smaller, apologies, I'm not used to the Mac. That's not the one.
It's a devil's machine.
That's what they tell me. But we love them. So this is our simple bot Lewis app. So what Lewis does, and this is all Lewis does, and it's important to understand, is it takes utterances, that's the text that you entered in, that ping, and it maps them to intents. And it uses machine learning to train itself to understand that this utterance means this intent. And there's a little bit of extra stuff around entities, a little bit of smarts there. But that's the key thing that we're going to do with Lewis. So what we can see over on the left-hand side here, we've got 3 intents, plus one called none, which is always there, which means I don't understand this intent, so I'm going to ignore it and pass it on. We'll talk about that one a bit later. And we've got entities. And so let's do an example. Let's see, show me talks by Tim Hill. So this might be our new utterance that we're going to test it out with. You can see it's given me this little box, and immediately it said Tim is a first name and Hill is a surname. And these are actually our custom entities that we've put into the system: first name, session code, last name. We've got a few more in the actual Ignite bot, but these are some simple ones. And we can say, yep, that's correct, and I can then go and submit that and say, tell Lewis that's how I understand that particular talk. Let's see if we want to create a new intent. So I'm at Ignite, it's 10 in the morning, I just want to go to the next session. Just surprise me. So let's call this new intent hit me. And when I type in hit me into the bot, I'm going to trigger this intent. So that's correct. Right now, hit me says it's the none intent. It says I don't understand you. We just choose the hit me intent. These numbers here on the side here are essentially the confidence it is about its prediction. So we're actually going to help it get more confident in terms of where it's going. So we say, actually, that should be the hit me intent. But there's a lot of ways I might say this sort of thing. So I might say, show me a random session.
Might just up the size on that a bit there, mate.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it should be a bit better.
And Lewis says, yeah, I understand that. That's get session details, right? We can say, no, that's not true. That's actually my hit me intent, and I'm going to tell Lewis, just remember that next time. I might just say, I'm bored. And again, we need to tell Lewis, in fact, this is what you should be doing. This is how you should be understanding that. Now, once I've done those things, I go and train the application, and that's going to the back end and doing all the sorts of machine learning stuff around natural language to to say, based on all of these information utterances that you've given me, I'm going to train myself to better understand what you're saying. So now when I go, perhaps I'll say random. It says, I think you mean hit me, and I've got a 90% confidence that that's the case. And we can then go and help Lewis a little bit more and say, yes, that's correct. That's what I'm after. So once I've trained that, the important thing is I then need to publish that endpoint. So all of this sort of stuff that I'm doing on the fly, I don't want to necessarily automatically make that available, but when I'm ready, I publish that. And that just updates the endpoint that our bot framework is going to talk to us on. So now when I go query hit me, you'll see you get this JSON payload back. And this is what the bot uses. Yeah, that's probably a bit harder to read, but the key thing there is top store. The most likely intent is the hit me intent. It's got an 89% likelihood according to this particular Lewis app. And then it's a bit of other meta information that, for the most part, we don't need to worry about. So let's have a look at our actual Ignite bot itself. I'll just go straight in there. Here you can see we've got about, I think, 22 intents, all sorts of different intents that are going to be useful. We've got a bunch of entities. And we've also got this interesting phrase list feature. So in our case, in this conference, we know the names of all the speakers and we know all of the session codes. Rather than letting Lewis guess that that Tim Hill is a name, we can actually plug these things into phrase lists. So we've got first names and last names. If I click on that and then try again, you can see down in the bottom left there a list of all the first names, and then we've got the same sort of thing with talks, all the session codes in there. So that's kind of an extra thing on top of it saying, wait a minute, you see this sort of thing, you should know that. And that's, for those of you who have done a little bit of machine learning, those sorts of things, that just helps the algorithm along where it's trying to draw circles around. These are the sorts of utterances that lead to this. We can just help it along a little bit more. Now, the really cool thing about this, yeah, go for it.
Do we have to manually put in those phrases?
No, you don't have to. It's useful to do so.
So the question was, do we have to manually put the phrases in?
Yes, there's also an API to...
Question clarification, can we programmatically put the... This is for the recording.
Yeah,
sorry. Can we programmatically put the phrases in, say through DevOps or some sort of publishing process? Not at the moment.
No. There is a Lewis API that
you can
do it, a RESTful API. We didn't use that in this case because
And so what we did is we actually had a little app that we built that just exported things out and we bring them into here, doing it that way. So.
Now, the cool thing about Lewis is that this is our production app, and every time we go and call the bot, it talks to this app that I'm looking at now. And we can actually get all of the user information, what users are actually searching for. So I might guess those phrases about hit me, but we're getting real user data here. So these four things up the top are really quite useful for production. So we've talked about adding new utterances. I'm just going to go over to suggest. This is Lewis saying, I need you to help me. And it's actually, it actually knows how to, these are the things that are going to help me the most. So for each entity and for each intent, let's say greeting, it says, these are the things that have come up, and I'd like you to tell me if this is, in fact, a greeting or some other intent. I've got an idea, and it's actually ordered, so the top one is the one it wants the most help with. If you say, yes, that's correct, a greeting, it's going to help Lewis the most. And then you might see some others, but let's have a look at...
So it doesn't do it automatically because it could be skewed down a certain path. So you have to, I guess, approve them almost?
Yeah,
say?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it will guess intents based on the current model that you've just published, but it will in this case it will guess a particular intent based on this example here. It'll say, will there be people with good taste and sophistication there? And it thinks it might be none, but it also thinks it might be goodbye. And maybe that's true. Maybe
that's the answer. Not
yeah.
the intent.
I don't think people with sophistication come here, so we should say goodbye. So that's it basically telling you how to help itself. And then you can do a couple of other things. I'm noticing that there's an error in a particular query that I do. And so I can go and search for that query by keyword. It will come up and I can find it here and then retrain it. Said, okay, no, that shouldn't be the none. That should be Wi-Fi or something else. So that's essentially Lewis in a nutshell. I think I've talked about phrases. Finally, you can just review all the labels and you can export this particular app. So we can show all the things that people have actually been saying and review them and make sure that they're correct. So why don't we go and see how we incorporate that into the actual code.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tim. So back to slides for a minute. So you can get a free Lewis account. Just head over to lewis.ai. You will need an Azure account to be able to create the keys, but you can actually create a free version of Lewis in there, but you need to put in the subscription keys. So there's that. The other thing with Lewis is important to remember that it gets better over time. It's really hard to make it absolutely 100% awesome on day one. And so even now with the Ignite bot, we're training it and fixing it and getting it better. And next year it'll be even better again because we'll be able to go forward with the learnings from this. But it is a machine learning. The more data it has, the more real-world data especially, it's going to get better and better. So yeah.
It is surprisingly good with a few phrases, the way it can understand natural language, but you never quite know what users are going to ask it. So it's useful to...
And man, they ask some interesting things, let me tell you. Okay, so let's have a look at how we actually get that into our app. All right, so back into code. Now, just waiting for that, there we go. Back into code. Now, remember, just before I set a breakpoint here, just before we get into this Lewis model. So first thing is that we don't want to have to actually go and manually start processing intents and things. As easy as it would be, it'd be very easy to actually parse that JSON data. Certainly much easier than actually trying to figure out what's in the language string. But what we do is we actually create a special type of class here that knows about Lewis. And it's actually a dialogue class. So we base on a bot builder SDK class called Lewis Dialogue. And the idea with this is that it can take in the query from the user, it can go off to Lewis, and it can bring back the response and then run a particular piece of code depending on what it is we want to do. So we've got our Lewis model. It's been decorated with the Lewis model attributes, so the system knows whereabouts to go when bot requests come into it later on. And the first thing to note is that this class needs to be serializable, and I'll investigate why that is in a minute, but suffice it to say, just it's going to start complaining pretty quickly if it's not serializable, so you sort of are you've got to be a little bit careful about what you include in here. Of course, you can have non-serialized fields, and that's okay. And it's heavily dependent on attributes. So what I've got here is I've got a method that's been labeled with the Lewis intent attribute, and it's going to look for the find person intent. So when Lewis comes back, it's just automatically going to run this piece of code if it's the find person intent. And then I can use the SDK to actually go and start figuring out what happens. So I'll pop a breakpoint in here. And whereas before I was just looking for ping, now I'm going to search for something a little bit more advanced. I'll just click retry on that. It's going to go off to Lewis, and then it's going to come in here. So it's already been up and back, so that's pretty quick. But it is actually a lot faster in the data center. So we hosted the bot in West US data center, which is really close to Lewis and all the other infrastructure. So the call is really quick over there. What's just happened is we've gone off, we've come back, it's done all of that processing, stripped everything out, and provided me a set of entities and the intent. So now I can just start stepping through here, and I can try and get out the first name and last name. Now, remember Tim was showing that he had those entities that were highlighted, and the machine learning systems detected what I'm talking about. And so if I hover over here, I can see there's entity recommendations, and within them, I can see that the entity type was first name, and then I typed Jordan, and there's a score of 0.87 in that this is actually really what I think it is. So nothing's ever completely concrete. You might have a piece of code that decides, hey, that's too low, I'm going to let it drop through and do something else. But in this case, it's fairly certain that that's what it is I was trying to do. We keep going through, and I'm able to get out the actual real first name and last name. Just do a quick check to make sure that the entity's not too short. We had a problem in the bot in production where really short names or short words were being detected as names, and so we've actually just made it so that if it's one or less characters, don't do it. Okay, so it'll go through here. We go off to our pretend backend service, and that's part of the reason why we didn't share the whole Ignite bot code. It was just so heavily integrated with the backend. So what I've done is I've just created this pretend backend service that goes off and just produces a session reply, much like the real server would. So you can sort of see what's going on at least. A couple of checks to see if we want to start replying to the user that it wasn't able to find anything. We then create a session card, which is, we'll see it in a minute, and then we post it back. So if I go back to the bot, you can see the session card's been created and posted back. We can add buttons to them. We can do all sorts of interesting things, so I can click more information and things like that, so the user doesn't have to type a reply. So bots can have very simple visual user interfaces to assist with guiding the user on the next step. So that's pretty cool there. I'll just flip this up. Okay, so the next, oops, I'm going to minus that. So there's another intent that I can hit as well, and so what I might do is just go up here a bit further, what's on tomorrow. So that was a fairly straightforward one. It was get some information and fire it back to the user. What happens if I do something like what's on tomorrow? What's on tomorrow? It's going to hit my what's on tomorrow intent. Now, what I actually want to do is make sure that I've got enough information to be able to answer that. And if not, then I'll go back to the user to actually clarify some further information. So I don't have time because I don't know what time that user just said, because it could be morning or afternoon. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fire back to the user one of these dialogues. And I've given it two choices, morning and afternoon, here in this string over here. So morning, afternoon, they could be anything, of course. And I fire into this SDK base class. One of the parameters, though, is this time slot choice async, which is actually a method in this class. So I'm just going to put a breakpoint in that. Now, this is pretty cool because when the question gets asked to the user, morning or afternoon, down here, when the question gets asked, it automatically knows to come back, rehydrate the Lewis model, and then go and run that method for me. So if I click morning here, it actually goes back into there. It's gone straight into this method, and now I can start handling the response and setting data and things. So we set that value into the user's state, which is very important. The bot framework manages state, and then we go back into where next. Now I do have the time this time because it's been set into the user's state, and then we can go off and get, just a pretend get on a database to go and get some sessions for that. If I ask the question again, and let it run through, and this time I go afternoon, we've just got a bit of a check there if it's morning or afternoon, and if it is, then it will show two things. So you can make decisions based on what the user does. So we do that a fair bit in the bot with track selection and things like that to help refine what the user's looking for. So. So the question is how long is the state stored for or something?
Or is it like native? Can you get access to previous?
Yeah, so you can actually store anything you want in that state. So you can store every question and things like that. We store things like the authentication token, so that way if you have Skype on your phone and on your computer, you only have to log into one of them, and then it sort of knows who you are and is able to treat you as an individual user, not a user on a device, which I think is pretty cool, because then you just start using it naturally wherever you are. But yeah, you can store pretty much anything in there, and it's all managed on the central server, so you don't have to worry about multi-machine configurations and state management and all that sort of stuff. It just does it.
The sort of pattern there is this stack of dialogue. So this top one serialised, and then you can have an extra dialogue clarifying question underneath that, and then it'll roll back up to the top and start again.
Can you get the bot to store who asked the questions using the authentication tokens? I work in a school, right? So there's every chance that I'm going to get, if I was to put something in like this for a help for the school, that I'm going to get students telling me where to go.
Yeah, so the question is, can you relate a query to a particular user later on? Can you store who asked the question? And so, firstly, I just want to be clear that we don't actually collect any personal information out of the chat. So we don't know anything about the user until they start giving us information. So in the Ignite bot, we flip them a link to go off and do an OAuth flow to log in. Once they've done that, we can associate exactly who they are, and we can do whatever we want with that. So we can store it in a database, every question and answer that people ask. We don't do that in this. We don't really care who's asking what. We just care what they're asking so we can refine it. And now that you guys know that we're not actually tracking who's typing what, I'm sure we'll see some very interesting things go in there. Please excite me. So yeah, I mean, that's great. And you can even do, using stream processing and stream analytics and other intelligent things in real time, you'd actually be able to say, hey, this user looks like they're having trouble just based on their processing and things. We might flip it to a real person, or give them, hey, it looks like you're blah, 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 I want to click this link and we'll get onto you personally or something. So you can do stuff proactively. You can also send messages to them later. So once you get their activity, their resumption cookie, you're able to go back and talk to them later. I'm sure there's all sorts of blog posts coming out about how much to pester people before they'll stop using your service and all that sort of thing, so I reckon go easy on it, but yeah, it's certainly possible to do. So integrating with Lewis is absolutely so super simple in the bot framework. It's not funny. You override the Lewis dialog, and then you just start adding attributes, and you can process those intents. It's really, really simple. You can, of course, always call Lewis, though, manually as a web service. Just a RESTful endpoint. It just returns JSON data, so you're able to integrate it into any app. It doesn't have to be a bot either, so you could use it just about anywhere. Processing intent on conversations, you could figure out, you could process a video or something and figure out if those intents are firing throughout there to see if they're talking about topics that you're interested in. Who knows? Like it could be, you could use it for anything. And so yeah, you've got the Lewis intent attribute. You also have to put the Lewis model attribute on the actual class. So the Lewis intent attribute on the methods that you want to fire with the intent name in them as a string, and then the actual Lewis model on the main thing. That's all. There's a good example in the SDK source. There's a pizza shop, and it uses a really good Lewis example to step through and ask more questions and things. So as well as our code, it's also there. I didn't point out earlier that the code URL is down the bottom of the screen there on our slides. So
let's actually just go back to the code for a second. Sorry, just click on that.
yeah,
How do
gonna work?
I do that?
I reckon just click on. It's not. Oh, you're gonna have to. Sorry. It's because it's in presenter mode. Okay. There we go.
Okay. And there was a Control T. All my shortcuts are going to be messed up, aren't they? There's a no intent there. I just wanted to call out a bit. So this is the none attribute that we saw in the Lewis model. So rather, it doesn't actually say none, it's just got an empty thing. This is what happens when Lewis doesn't have a good intent for you. We want to go and do something a little bit smarter, or we want to try again so that the user isn't left with a frustrating experience. How do I get back to that? Is that back? How do
Yep.
I-
Oh, yeah, just here. There we go. Yep.
Yeah, so this is our fall through. So Lewis is your artisanal, organic, small batch AI. It's handcrafted, and as a result, it's a bit more expensive. So it handles a maximum of 40 intents, and generally each one of those, as we saw, is individually handled in the code. So you've got a method with a decorator on it, and you handle that in a particular way. That works okay, but doesn't really scale. Q&A Maker is a new service. It's still in preview. That actually sits on top of Lewis, but hides a lot of the complexity. And it's your mass-produced AI. So this is where we focus on question answer, question answer. That's what it's good at. So you can very easily put in new questions and put in answers to those questions. And it's great for FAQs. That's the sort of thing that it tends to do. It doesn't have the nuances of Lewis, but treats all queries in the same way, but it finds an answer if it can.
For the conference, we put in roughly 200 question and answer pairs. All sorts of things like, you know, where is the nearest McDonald's, or how high is the car park roof? Is there halal food? Just all sorts of just questions that have been asked over the years. We had the guys put together a big list of question and answers, and so Tim's going to do a bit of a demonstration now on Q&A Maker.
Yeah. And I'll just quickly talk through now. If neither of those picked up an answer, because we just don't know about it, we're going to try a fallback catch-all. And in this case, we just did an Azure search on the actual sessions, just hooked into the Event Management API, and just did an Azure search on the sessions. So let's go to...
Yeah, you'll have to close that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Just like Lewis.ai, we've got QAMaker.ai. So let's just see how easy it is to actually create a new service. Q&A Maker service is just like a Lewis app. So let's give it a name, Nightbot Demo Test. And there's a couple of cool things you can do here. If you have a public website with FAQs already there, you can actually point that to that website, and it will try and pick out question and answers from that FAQ page and automatically put them into its knowledge base. We don't have one of them, but we can very easily upload a file of Q&A demo.
Yep.
So you can see here, I think you can see that. This is really just a tab-separated question answer, one question answer per line. This is an older version of the FAQ that we ended up using. And that's it. So now I create it, and take a couple of minutes, it'll just go through, put them into its knowledge base, ready for testing and training. So always has a hi, tries to be friendly, as we talked about before. Hi, hello intent, but then there's all of our knowledge base questions. So there's about 150 odd there in this particular one. So we can then go and publish that as an endpoint and get to use that on the in the bot. But if we notice that someone's asked a question that they don't get a response to, we can very easily add another question and answer on the fly in production. So what's a good question? Be my Valentine. So a lot of people here, a bit lonely at the conference, want to talk to the bot, and we can give it an answer. save and train that bot.
The production bot's a little bit nicer.
Are the questions sort of fuzzy as well in this?
Yeah, so it uses a very similar, I guess, system to Lewis.ai. So it isn't actually just searching, it's taking them and using them to learn, and you can add alternatives and refine them and do all sorts of things. So you can ask the question in many different ways and it will still know roughly what you're talking about. That's all right. We'll just keep moving on. Lee.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then I'll just see if I can, I was just going to go and, the other thing you can do, that's all right, we'll just go straight to production, I think.
Make some live changes here.
Live changes on the fly. Do you have Skype open? Yeah. Okay. That shouldn't take too long. I just wanted to show testing that one. That's going to take a bit longer by the looks of it.
Yeah, it
Okay.
usually only takes
There you go.
just a couple of seconds to process those.
So the other thing is, we're just like Lewis, we're getting real questions coming through, so we can test some of these things now. So be my Valentine. We see on the left-hand side the most appropriate response according to Q&A Maker, but we can also add alternative text, just like Lewis. This isn't quite as sophisticated, but you can do all the sorts of things you need to in a question and answer. So I love you, Ignite bot, and just add that question.
So if the bot's being creepy, you know that Tim did it.
Yeah, so you can blame it all on me.
Very good.
Save and train, and then we can publish that. That one didn't work, but we can publish that, and then we should be able to check the changes. That looks good. Publish that.
And again, it's just available on a RESTful endpoint, so you don't have to use any special tooling to be able to go and... no, this is on the live bot.
That's not a live bot. So easy to make a change on the fly there. So let's
Very
go.
good. Might just keep moving there.
Sure.
Yep. I just want to demo something that I think is really important in bots. What we did is we've actually made the bot so then if you ask it a question in something other than English, it was going to respond to you in the appropriate language. Hey, it looks like you're not speaking English. Would you like for me to translate? And so if I type in bonjour, it's going to go, and this is what it was meant to do in the keynote. It's going to go and ask me in French, hey, would you like me to start translating for you? And then I can, yeah, I'll just get rid of that, sorry. And then it goes, yeah, I'm now translating for you. And so the whole bot's written in English, and we wrap around the outside Bing Translator automatically, so you don't have to do any heavy lifting or having to work with resources or get someone to translate all your resources using the language kit and all that sort of stuff. It just does it automatically using the neural net translator, the Bing Translator, into 60 languages actually. So it really works quite well. Yes, Nick, I am very busy. And so what we've done is in this app, we've actually gone and installed a version of our code that we built to help translate bots. It's not part of the SDK, but we've made it available up on GitHub as well. And so what it actually does is, if it hits no intent and we're not speaking English, it will actually drop through and start detecting the language. So you can see our translator service here takes the query and it goes and detects the language. And because it can automatically do that, we can then save that into the user's state. And then we just know straight away next time that they want to converse in this language. It's really good for scenarios like we're working with a couple of companies around bots that might talk to students coming in from overseas, and they don't know a lot of English. And so if they're able to ask it, for example, in Chinese, what courses are there, and then the bot can actually guide them through starting off an application in their own language. But on the other side, what's stored in their database is all in English. It's all been brought back and normalised out. So the other thing is that because you're translating before it goes in, all the Lewis intents fire, the Q&A make things hit. So I think it's really, really important to note that you couldn't do translation using resources and things in this system because of the intents and because of all the Q&A things. It would be a lot more difficult. So I shouldn't say never, but yeah, it would be difficult to do. And this just makes it so easy. So I'm just writing all my responses in English. Here's where it actually said, hey, you're not speaking English. Would you like me to translate for you? I wrote that in English, and it's gone out and actually translated it for me. So that's pretty cool. I think that's a powerful feature that really adds that extra layer on top of bots, considering how easy it is to do. So I think that's really important. So that's that. Some other things that we relied on during the bot build, we use App Insights quite heavily, so we're keeping an eye on the system. Even now, if something goes wrong with it, we're going to start getting texts and emails and things. But it's not just about when something goes wrong or when something's about to go wrong. It's more about actually looking at usage and seeing if people are hitting what they want to do. So we've got little markers for success if they've had a good run through the bot and things like that. We also use Redis Cache to store all the sessions in and just pretty much all the information. So we're not going back and hounding the back-end system all the time. And we set up a web job to bring that refresh data in every hour. And so the other thing is that is perhaps RTFM. So at the keynote, after the keynote, the bot stopped accepting friend requests because it was hidden and unpublished, and we didn't realise that would happen. There's a limit on how many users you can add into the bot when it's not published. So we started frantically emailing people, you up. It's getting into the sort of evening hours over there in Redmond. And we found a guy, and he's like, yeah, I've got access to the tool, but I don't know how to work it. So he's like sitting there going, nope. And so after about an hour, we had the bot published, but that's something really important to consider, and don't make that mistake. Oops, sorry. Okay.
I can talk
Yeah,
to this if you like.
cool.
I think one of the most important, this is one of the more important parts of it, is some of the lessons we learned, like publishing, in building the bot. So we use that fall through Lewis, then try Q&A maker, if not try search. And I think in most cases that worked well. One thing that we might have done in the future, for very short queries, when people are really just doing that type of keyword search, we'd probably detect that that's a 2-word query and go straight to search. So an example was Office 365. That fell through Lewis, but then it matched a couple of Q&A intents. It said, oh, you wanted the post office. So we had to train Q&A not to say, no, I don't want the post office. So rather than doing that for keyword searches, that sort of thing, you might try search up front. Deployment is a good one, I think, if you're looking at putting this into production. I think the best way to do this would be to do most of your training in a dev or a pre-prod environment, and then you can export the Lewis app or the Q&A app and then import it back into production. So you're basically then got version control with the JSON file. And if you need to make hotfix type changes in production, you're missing this key query, you can do that, and then you can export it and backfill it. But I think that's going to be a much better sort of version management thing when you're dealing with version management on the code and version management on this trained application. The other thing I think is to think about overlapping intents, particularly with Lewis. Try not to overlap your intents too much. Not only does it potentially cause Lewis to be unsure of whether I mean when is a session or where is a session, but the person training it might occasionally get confused with their intents and train it the wrong way. So really try and have these distinct intents and handle them separately.
We had some strange behaviour, and I think the point there is that these systems really do get better over time. It can be difficult to just launch them and like with a V1 product and have them work exactly as you want. So I think long beta testing and dog fooding and internal use and things like that are going to be important to get these models right before unleashing it on the public, which we didn't do that. We just unleashed it. And it's been really good. And to be fair, we actually did get the Lewis information from the overseas conference, so we had a good head start. But I think that could have been risky. So, well, not risky. It just might, if we had have had that 6 months of people using it for Ignite, which unfortunately only runs for a few days, then it would have been better. And I'm hoping that in other scenarios that would be a thing. The other thing is that with the Q&A maker, you want to avoid open-ended answers. You want to make sure that it's actually closing the loop. So someone asked the bot, can I go naked? And the Q&A came back with no, but Jordan Knight will be. And so it should have said the actual full response. So that way, even if it was a bit led, it's not going to look like the bot has actually answered their original question. So you need to be careful with the way you phrase things that can lead the bot down a certain path. In Lewis, you can turn on the spell check API and it will actually fix spelling mistakes for you to hopefully make it hit intents better. We had to turn it off because it was messing around with session codes as they were going through. So if you've got special entities that have they need to be spelt that way, there's no way at the moment to actually just say to turn it off for entities, because when the spell check's running, it doesn't actually know whether or not they're entities yet. So we had to disable that, but that's a pretty good feature, I think, to help spelling mistakes, especially with I think if you're translating on the front of it, it might help fix up some stuff. And yeah, there's the note on the publishing beforehand. That's it.
So, does anyone have any questions about how that worked, or? Say again, sorry. Oh, the slash commands. What was the question about them? Can you create new slash commands?
They're part of the
Yeah, so the slash commands, we haven't experimented with that very much, so I don't think I know the answer to that one.
So we don't, but what we do is we have a couple of commands that you can do to reset language. We've also got one command count, so we can see how many messages have been sent into the bot. We've got just a few things that we intercept the text as it comes into the bot in that message controller and just return the response out of that. The slash commands, an important aspect of bot building is that the bot code is separated from the UI and from the client, so you don't actually know what the client is. It's very agnostic. And I feel like the slash commands would be a client-specific thing. So one client will have certain commands, other ones will have different ones. So you're going to be always testing, to see if this client, that client, other client.
I believe they're in the bot builder framework, so that's the framework used.
Okay.
Here, so you could, and that's on GitHub. So I believe you could probably download the source to that and modify that if you needed to.
There you go. Very good. So, is there any other questions? Yes.
Things like user data, which is obviously stored by the framework, is that costs on storage, or is that just not?
Good question. So the question is there any cost for the storage of user data in the framework? I don't believe so. We're certainly not paying. I'm not sure what the plans are going forward, whether or not that'll be a subscription model. When you set up a bot, you do have to create a Microsoft app and an app ID. At the moment, there's no indication that that'll be charged for, but I'm not entirely sure going forward. So that's something to follow up.
Yeah, we certainly didn't have to do any storage account.
No.
We had an app service plan and an app service.
There's no other sort of weird storage we had to set up or anything like that. So, yeah.
Question over here. Sorry. Oh no, this guy here. Yeah, you go.
So the question was, can you import and export learnings from a bot into another bot?
And the answer is yes, you can. So we did that training utterances intent and then selecting that. We can export that app and it's just a big piece of JSON. The important thing there is if you don't train on those utterances right now, they don't get captured anywhere. So you would want to get all of the utterances that will come in, train them, and then export it.
Yeah. So I think that there'll be a lot of GitHubs and things, you know, open source projects that manage shared intents that you can use in other projects. And Lewis actually comes with the Cortana one. So you can see how it works and add and remove events and things like that. So,
and we probably should add that Cortana will be a channel to Lewis in the near future. But it's not there yet.
Did you have a question?
I did, yeah. Just with the bot framework, if there was rich responses that had like images, buttons that you can send back, are there compatibility limits depending on the channel they're using, like
Yeah.
for example?
Good question. So if some of the responses had buttons and images and things, and there's the card replies, there is actually a check in there to see if you're using one of the supported clients, which is pretty much all of them. They're actually getting really good with it. But for example, in Microsoft Teams, there was a certain button that didn't work, so we changed something around, and perhaps that's just something to do with that Teams build or whatever. But we're able to actually do those checks to see how it works and test on those other platforms. And certainly, if you're conversing back to them in a voice-operated thing like Cortana or Alexa or something like that, those buttons make no sense. So you're going to need to check things like that. So it's a good question.
I think actually also right now there is a bit of compatibility. We got caught out. We were testing on the emulator the carousel. So if you get a lot of sessions, you can actually swipe left and right. In Skype, that's limited to 5 cards. So you'll notice if you have a very longer than 5, it'll actually do that list, which is a bit uglier, but there's a few limits.
You know the channel via the API when you're processing.
Yes.
Something, so you can decide what to do with it based on.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. There's a question down the back there.
So this is the point on or can be used by Skype and Teams. Is it possible to use it on an on-prem Skype for Business solution?
So the question is, will this work with Skype for Business?
Watch this space is the answer. Yeah.
Not saying yes, not saying no. Yes.
Yeah, just continuing on from that, I've used it with Slack, and there's a couple of things missing from the Slack channel right now. And the bot builder is open source, but the bot framework stuff behind it doesn't see many obvious places for contact for what's coming or roadmap.
Okay.
Do you know any Twitter handle or anything to help out?
I don't know a Twitter handle. Then the channel is through that site. So I think again, just watch the space as we push it harder and start getting it, I guess, more open and developer friendly in that regard. I think the whole thing is fairly developer friendly with the best of intentions with the SDK open sourcing and things like that. Probably still ramping up around the actual the connector in the background. So yeah. Yes.
How much of your lives did you burn setting this up?
That is an excellent question.
Is it a month or is it 3/4 of the year?
So how much of our lives did we burn getting this going? Started off with, let's build a bot. And then at the end of it, it's like, well, that took a bit longer than I thought. It actually probably 2 weeks full time to do the whole lot. Had other work to do. I'm a track owner at Ignite, and we had keynote segments and things like that to plan all in the lead up. But essentially, it was, whilst there was a fair bit in it and a lot of different things to think about, we did go for the sort of like the BMW version of it. So we added language translation, we added the Azure search fall through, Q&A maker, Lewis, and then we worked really hard on that, and there's only a couple of us working on it. Plus the fact that we were doing a production system, it's not just a demo, so we had to have environments and a bit of load testing and all that sort of stuff in there.
A decent amount of that was the SDK with the event management software.
Yeah, so a big piece of the work was actually the back-end system didn't have an SDK, so we had to write that. And I think probably 60% of it went into that. So if we had easier access to that, we would have saved a lot of time. The thing is with it though is that I found the process from a software development or software developer angle to be sane. So the bot framework behaved as I expected it to. And actual coding against and actually producing this app it worked in ways that I was used to, and it wasn't unfamiliar or anything like that. Got right into it pretty quickly. There were a couple of days when I was deep down in the bot framework code trying to figure out how things work, but that was because I was bolting on the translator stuff, and I needed to figure out how to intercept bits and pieces here and there. But other than that, it's obviously handy having the source code for that. But other than that, yeah, it was not too bad. Yeah, we'd do it again. Any other questions? No. I do have an announcement to make. I've never had this before. Someone comes up and goes, got an announcement. If you have parked your vehicle in a level 1 car park, please move it to level 2 urgently to avoid towing. Who has their car on level 1 of the car park? No? Good.
Not anymore.
So just wanted to quickly call out the... Where are we? So yeah, we've got the bot available on GitHub there. So go ahead and just grab it. And we've actually been nice enough to put all of our codes in there. So for Lewis and for Q&A Maker and things, do suggest you create your own. But at least this way you can just F5 it and give it a shot. We'll probably take them down in a couple of weeks because people on the internet are nasty. That's not a general, it's more a reflection on experience than anything else. But but we just put them in there just so then you guys can have a bit of a play around in the next couple of days without having to go through and create all those accounts, and hopefully you get something out of that. The other thing is that we've got there's a DX Australia. I'll just go back to my thing here. We've got a DX Australia GitHub thingy. So just go home. Oh, I'm not signed in. Okay. That's why I can't see it. Sorry about that. There we go. So we've got a DX Australia, which is MSFTAUDX on GitHub. Now, this is a new thing that we're doing, and we're trying to make sure that we pool and centralise everything that we build into one place. So we've got the translator on there. This code I've just written will be on there. Any demos from things that we do are going to be on this GitHub. So I think it's going to be a good spot to follow along, and we're going to start talking about that more. And usually we're aiming to put interesting stuff up there that we've been working on, like the translator for the bot and things like that. So follow that along as well. And I think, unless there's any more questions, then that's us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.